we might just wait till one. We're officially at 1 o'clock, so we can kick off. Good afternoon, everybody, and you are very welcome to our webinar on the Doctorate of Business Administration. We are delighted you have all signed up. I am going to pass you over to our esteemed colleague, Professor Paul Ellwood, who is the Director for the DBA here at Maynooth University. There is a question box. I know, Paul, you're going to cover this, but just to remind people, there is a question box. So as we work through the slides, if you have any questions, do let us know. Over to you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Okay, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Michelle's mentioned one of them. If you have questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat. Somebody's looking at the chat and noting all the questions, and so that we don't miss anything. And the other just piece of housekeeping is that the session will be recorded. And the video will be made available on our website afterwards for anyone to view. So if you don't want to appear on the screen, just turn off your camera. Okay, let's get into it. So in the webinar today, what I'm going to do is introduce the Doctorate of Business Administration at Maynooth University, which is a new DBA that's launching this year. My name is Paul Ellwood. I'm the director of the DBA program here. I've worked on DBA programs for 13 years. And just as a little introduction to me, I spent for 20 years of my working life in industry, in private industry, and reached director level. And I've spent the last 20 years in university. And my specialist academic discipline, as it were, is doctoral education. Okay, so here's what I intend to cover today. So I want to start off by answering the question, why do people study for DBA doctorates? And not simply give you my opinions, but rather report things that applicants and graduates have noted to me over the years. Then I'm going to present 4 brief case studies of DBA thesis projects so that you get a sense of what sort of projects that people do. I'll then move on to the Maynooth DBA in particular and highlight some of the distinctive features of the program. And then I will wrap up with talking about some practical matters of structure, entry requirements, fees, and how to apply. And all that'll take, I hope, about 30 minutes. And then we'll have 30 minutes left for addressing your questions. Okay, let's get into that. So what I've got on the slide here now is things that that people have told me over the years. So I must have had hundreds of conversations actually with people wanting to do a DBA and also after graduating. And these 4 things are ideas and thoughts that recur time and again, things that people say to me. So a very common thing I hear for doing a DBA is that people want to be tested at the highest academic level, at the doctoral level. There's some sense in which people have studied for a master's and they feel that their education is not yet finished, or they want to test themselves at the highest possible level. A second thing I hear many times is that, well, yes, the academic qualification is good, it's important, but I want some practical outcome now at this level. So generating novel evidence-based insights that are relevant for the organization in which I work and which support organizational change is a key output they want from the degree. And in doing this, they hope to become more visible. That phrase, more visible, is something I've heard so many times. Another motivation is a recognition that often, if you're a senior manager, there will be projects or there will be initiatives that you want to do and that you want to lead, which the busy schedules of of senior roles just don't make the time for. They just these are projects that are important but aren't necessarily urgent enough to get addressed in the workloads of senior managers. And so having the opportunity or the kind of, we might say, protected time in which we could address these projects is another motivation. And then the final one here I want to draw attention to is the notion of becoming a thought leader in a professional area. So here we're looking beyond just the organization in which you work now, and maybe in your kind of disciplinary area, you want to be seen something of a leader. So I heard these time and time again. So if you can relate to any of these motivations, then the DBA program could be the program for you. What I'd like to do now is to move on to 4 short case studies. And what I want to do with these case studies, the big point I want to make is the variety of settings in which DBA programs work, the different kind of professional challenges that people have addressed through DBA research. So, and I've picked 4 deliberately. So I've picked one from a kind of public service, government agency perspective, which is this first one. I'm then going to follow it up with the healthcare sector example, then an example of a large corporation, then an example of a very small enterprise. So in this project here, it followed the implementation of a major public investment in food security in Mozambique. And by major, I mean many hundreds of millions of pounds. So this was a really important strategic project for the government in Mozambique. And the DBA student worked for it's kind of a non-governmental organization, but it reported into the Ministry of Agriculture. So it was also a kind of government agency. And the challenge in this project that he brought to the DBA program was that the aim was to try and resolve multi-stakeholder conflicts that were happening in this program. It's an extremely large program, as you can imagine, with that level of investment, and progress was being stymied by multiple sources of conflict. So he wanted to research into that and understand what it was. If I cut to the chase and tell you what organizational impact as he resolved those conflicts, and there was actually a 3-fold increase in rice production in the area that he was responsible for. So you can imagine that's quite a significant achievement. What his research elucidated was the characterization of these stakeholder conflicts, and he actually identified 4 dimensions of these particular tensions, which once he knew what they were, he could address. And the interesting thing was that this fellow was, you might imagine as well, he was, very experienced. He was a very senior manager, and he came into the DBA absolutely convinced it was an intercultural conflict problem because it was a Mozambique-China international project, and this was not the case. He actually found through research there was no intercultural dimension at all. So this is an interesting example where the research turned on its head, as it were, the expectations of a very senior person. The other thing I wanted to mention here was, resolving multi-stakeholder conflict. It's not exactly new. We might have all experienced something like that in our professional lives. What was distinctive here was the particular context and the complexity of the context. And this is important to bear in mind with DBA programs. This is what DBA programs address. Context is absolutely essential to DBA programs. Resolving through research these challenges is not simply a matter of taking off-the-shelf research and, in some sense, applying it. The DBA project involves the integration of not only academic research, but also professional experience. That's why, although the challenges may seem ordinary, because of the complexity of the context. Something extras needed. This is why often, master's level dissertations don't address these sorts of challenges, and why we do DBA projects. Finally, in terms of personal impact for Armando, he's the fella I should have mentioned, in the blue shirt there, shaking hands with a woman farmer who's in the pink top. What happened for him was he got increased responsibility as a result of this success, and his national profile was enhanced. Okay, moving on to the second case. The setting here is in a healthcare setting, and it was a kind of an evidence-based management project in a major national hospital. And the challenge was that in this hospital, they were revisiting their clinical internship programs. And there was a sense in which these things needed to change and improve. And so that became the challenge for the student. And again, cut to the quick, the organizational impact, they were able to recommend, or she was able to recommend, a restructuring of the internship program. And the first one they applied it for was in the case of physiotherapists. What she did as part of her research was a thematic synthesis of existing research literature covering the supervision and education of internship programs in a clinical context. And her empirical work involved what's known as a participatory evaluation. So it's not simply an evaluation of the current program, but a participatory one, working with past and present students on the program in order to improve it. Now, interesting enough, the student here was also very senior, very prominent individual in her country. But what she reported was, these are her words, what she reported was an increased credibility in her organization, because in her working in a healthcare setting, and she was in the senior board of this hospital, everybody else round the table had a doctorate because they were largely clinicians. She was the only one that didn't have a doctorate. And so she felt the fact that she was able within her own professional area to get a doctorate increased her credibility with her colleagues. Okay, this third example is the case of a DBA student who was a senior vice president in a large global pharmaceutical company. And he was interested in how in such large companies with multiple sites across the world, how they marshaled organizational learning across all the different sites. And the particular project he looked at was a manufacturing project. So they had a number of manufacturing sites around the world. There's about 6 or 7, as I recall. And each of these manufacturing units was built the same, used the same material inputs, and ran the same manufacturing processes. And they all got different performances. So this makes no rational sense. So the question was, how do we achieve consistent performance and consistently best performance across all these sites? So he worked with the site managers across the different sites, and as part of his project, he used the Lego serious play technique. You can hence the photograph in the slide here. So he used that technique as part of an action research methodology. Cutting to the quick, what they achieved through his DBA research was a 35% reduction in capital costs, because they had been looking at capital investment in order to get the performance up. So they got a reduction in capital cost, and at the same time, 15% increased productivity. So that was very welcome by his organization. And in terms of his scholarly insights that he got from his research, this was the research impact. He elucidated what is called an ambidexterity mechanism in order to explain how the that was occurring between the sites now as a result of the connections between the managers at the different sites. How that learning between the sites actually created an opportunity to develop novel solutions within sites. So it became something of a sustainable organizational learning project. And in the final example, what I wanted to show is that DBAs don't just work for such large organizations, they can work for the smallest of organizations. So the previous example was a multinational pharmaceutical private company. This is a new enterprise to start with. It was a one-woman enterprise, and it's a social enterprise. And it concerns how such enterprises become financed. So microfinancing for social enterprising was the title of the research. What it meant practically, what she was interested in practically, is how did she move on from the funding she'd received from family and friends in order to grow the enterprise. And a scholarly insight from the DBA was what she learned was how quantitative and qualitative data could be integrated into a decision-making algorithm for investment partners. So she created a web-based tool with which she could connect with a lot of public and private investors. And the outcome for her was that she managed to launch her new enterprise. And that is a social enterprise, and its aim was to conserve underutilized buildings. It was in Scotland, actually, underutilized buildings in Scotland through a collaborative public-private process of repurposing. Now, that move into what might call property development or old property redevelopment was a new change for her. That was she was a professional in one area and she was pivoting and creating this social enterprise in another area. And what she told us was having the DBA increased her visibility and credibility in a new business sector. And again, in her words, and I'm reporting her words, she said it made me more visible as a woman, because she was moving into a very male-dominated property development sector. And she felt the DBA meant she got listened to more than she felt she would have been without it. So with these 4 cases, what I've tried to just give a quick overview of is a variety of different organizational settings, different professional challenges, and the ways in which both professional and academic knowledge was integrated in order to generate new thinking. Okay, what I wanted to now move on to is just to explain a little bit about what I think of as the distinctive features of the Maynooth University DBA. I would expect and I would encourage that you would be researching a number of DBA programs. And so the purpose of this slide is to show what's different about Maynooth and why I think it delivers benefits. What I want to say just by way of introduction, the program at Maynooth will be the 3rd DBA program I've managed. It'll be the 2nd DBA program I've designed and launched. And it will be the 1st DBA program where I was given a blank sheet of paper to design the program that I wanted. And I've tried to draw on all that experience plus all my own research in order to design the program. And there's nothing unique about this. You will find if you've studied other programs, you might recognize some of the features here, but as a collection of features, I think the program that we're creating at Maynooth is quite distinctive. So the first feature I'd want to mention is that 95% of the training and supervision is delivered online. And the benefit this delivers, I think, is that it helps you balance, personal work and study time commitments. And I think it's distinctive from many programs, because many programs require you to attend campus on multiple occasions during the year in order to get the research training. All the research training will be online and all the research supervision will be online. The only thing you will visit Maynooth for is actually a research conference, which is itself something of an innovation. The second feature I want to mention is that the training, the research training, runs concurrently with the research. And the benefit that gives is that there's actually a minimal gap between getting the training and then putting it to practice in your research project for the first time. Now, that is actually different from a large number of DBA programs, including the ones I've worked on before, where we had a model in which the research took place in, sorry, I beg your pardon, the training took place in the first 2 years, and then the research is concentrated in the thesis research in the second 2 years. By running it concurrently, it means that there's the gap between receiving the training and all the learning you get as a result of that, and then using it in your own thesis research project is kept to a minimum. A third distinctive feature is that we will allocate supervisors, thesis supervisors, 2 of them, during the first year, actually at the start of the second semester. And the advantage this gives you is that when in the second semester you're developing your final thesis proposal, you will have your supervisors on hand to mentor that development. So in the semester 2 of the first year, you will get some training by a specialist tutor in thesis proposal development, but you will have kind of offline from that supervisory support to help you shape. And that's quite distinctive. Many programs allocate supervisors in the third year. And then the final feature is that the thesis document that you will submit for exam after 4 years will be built through a structured series of deliverables across all 4 years. So what I mean by that is at the end of every year there will be a hard deliverable in relation to a particular chapter in the thesis. And the reason I've done this is because I've seen over a dozen or more years now, senior managers are really good at hitting regular program deadlines. In fact, it doesn't matter how urgent or pressing they are. If they are regular, they get met. However, if you give senior managers one big deadline, for example, the thesis is due in 2 years, that's a lot harder. That's a lot harder. Now, I can relate to this. I'll be honest, I can relate to this personally. My own doctorate in management studies. It's a PhD doctorate, but it was studied part-time. I had a full-time job. We had a young family at the time with all the responsibilities that gave me. And that program was 5 years. That part-time PhD was 5 years, and I can tell you it took me 7 years. I submitted my thesis 2 weeks within the deadline after 7 years. So I get this. If you have a long deadline that it's in the distance and you've got work to do or you've got kids to look after, then other things happen. But if you give senior managers, regular deadlines, they're met. So what I'm suggesting is through this structure, through this suite of support, through the online training, the concurrent mix of training with research and the thesis supervisors in year 1, this is a program that you can complete in 4 years. Okay, I just want to, in this final bit, get on to just some practical features. I wanted to just show this quickly because this is in visual form, kind of the points I've just made with the current table on the other slide. So you will see this diagram on our website as well. You see through reading left to right in the middle there, you'll see years 1, 2, 3, and 4. And each year, the semesters have a particular theme in mind. And at the end of the year, there will be particular chapters to deliver for your thesis document. You will see where at the top of the diagram the assignment of the research supervisors takes place, And at the bottom of the diagram, you'll see a feature that I haven't mentioned yet. And this is the Maynooth DBA Research Conference. Now, this is the one time that you attend during the year. It occurs at the end of this the semester program, the formal training that occurs through the years. The conference comes in June at the end of each year, and it's a 3-day event. It's organized as a research conference, and the idea is to give you the opportunity to practice the delivery and dissemination of your research, and also to meet with your supervisors in person and to prepare that chapter. Because 1 month after the conference, there will be the deadline for the delivering of the chapters for that year. This slide shows the entry requirements and fees information. So the entry requirements for the DBA program are pretty much what they are in all DBA programs, actually. These are programs for senior managers, at least 5 years experience, and you must work full time. It's not possible to do this without working full time. Typical DBA researchers hold a master's level, an MBA type qualification. If you don't have that qualification, that level of qualification, but have extensive experience, then on a case-by-case basis, we have a process for evaluating prior learning. So that if you don't have a master's student, there's just a different process kicks in, and the usual English language proficiency requirement of the university needs to be met. The total program fees for the whole 4 years, 44,000 euros. We believe that given the quality of the program, that makes us very competitive. This is certainly something that I know you will research, but if you look at our fees in relation to the other programs that I know through Europe and in the United States, then I think you'll find this very competitive. And then how to apply? Well, we've got a lot of supportive information on the website that's there just below the photo of the Maynooth campus. So if you click on that link in the slide there, you'll get through to the DBA web pages, and there is a particular link you can click on preparing your application, and it explains what documentation that you've got to prepare. In regarding documentation, I would draw attention to the research proposal itself. This is, for us, this is about 2,000 words, and in which you set out the problem that you plan to address. And there's information on the website about how you might go about that. You then, once you've got all your documentation prepared, you would submit it through our online application portal. Like most universities now, ours is called MU Apply. And again, you will find instructions and guidelines on how to do that on the website. We review all the applications that come in, and ones that we think would make a suitable candidates for the DBA program are invited for a 30-minute interview. And what we do there is that there's no extra material to prepare. Actually, what we do there is we'd like to hear you talk about your experience and your interests. We will have read it in the documentation that you prepared, but it's always nice to hear you talk about it and understand your motivations and your research interests. And then finally, just as another piece of support for your application, in a month's time, the 14th of May, round about this time as well, we'll be running a free online seminar to help you prepare your thesis proposal specifically for your DBA program application. It's open to everybody. Even if you're not thinking of applying to Maynooth, you're more than welcome to join it. You need to bear in mind that some of the comments I make will be geared around the particular form of the thesis proposal we like to, I like to see, but you're more than welcome to join that, even if you're not joining us. And what we'll do is we'll send out links to everybody who's on this call, of the link for that webinar in a month's time. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Michelle,
Thanks
and
so
I
much,
will take
Paul.
any questions that have emerged in the chat. Thank
Yes,
you.
we have loads of questions. That was so interesting. Thank you so much. I think the case studies really highlight the breadth and the diversity of the backgrounds of the people
Mhm.
who are doing DBAs and the types of challenges and roles and everything that they have. So that was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Lots of questions to get through, so I will throw them out at you and we will get through them. So the first question is, how is a DBA and a PhD different?
Okay. Yeah. So the number of I could talk a long time about this one. I'm sometimes invited to talk at other schools about this. Um, the key way to think about it is that the DBA is for senior professionals. So these are people who bring to their doctoral study a wealth of professional knowledge, a wealth of management knowledge, a wealth of experience, and the degree process involves bringing together academic knowledge and professional knowledge. In contrast to that, the only thing in play in a PhD program really is academic knowledge. Um, uh, People doing PhDs are invariably at the beginning of their careers, whereas the people who are studying for DBAs are already well established in their careers. For a PhD, having a practical application is nice. For a DBA, having a practical application is almost essential. It's the rationale for doing it. So, if you are already an experienced senior professional, then I would advise you to not do what I did, because I did a PhD. I didn't know DBAs existed. The DBA is the program for senior professionals.
Great, that's very clear. Thank you. The next question then is just around the timing. So is the first intake of this September 2026 or is it September 2027?
So the first year will be September this year. It's coming
Great.
up. The and the first week in September will be the week for induction, and we've already got some people, in that cohort, but there's room left. And then each year we'll recruit once a year, and it will start in same time, September.
Brilliant. Then the next question is, how is the Maynooth DBA program ranked in Ireland and globally? But obviously it's brand new.
Yeah. There are actually no rankings for DBA programs. There isn't a scheme. People may be aware that in the MBA world, as it were, the Masters of Business Administration, there is a ranking scheme. There is an accreditation body called AMBER. There is no accreditation for the DBAs. I mean, they all have to fit the guidelines and the governance requirements of universities, which are managed by government. So they have to demonstrate a particular standard to government, but there isn't a scheme to rank them. Even for the very the very established ones, that the ones I've worked in the past. There's no way of knowing, as it were, that they're better, than others that have existed for a long time. So, in making a choice, I think what I would advise people is, and what people have told me in the past, the things that people make a choice on are cost, how big the fees are. Um, and the structure of the program, whether they think it fits with their professional lives. This is a challenging program. It's probably the longest degree that most people will study for 4 years, and it's 4 years round the calendar. These things run 12 months a year. So this is the longest degree anyone does. So you've got to think, will this fit with my professional life? And is the price right? These are the two things.
And I think fair to say with your background and your experience with running DBAs, we've kind of designed this program with those considerations in mind.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Particularly finishing on time. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
And this one obviously drawing a little bit on your experience that you referenced, but what are the main differences between a DBA and I think you mentioned you had done the PhD in business management?
Yeah. So the main difference was the contribution that I made in the PhD was an academic contribution. I published a 4-star a paper in a top journal, and this is what PhD students are aiming to do. There might have been some practical implications, though there were practical implications um, from the research, and I had to give an account of those in the thesis. But you're not held to account for those in the viva at the end of it. What the examiners are looking for in the case of a PhD is a contribution to academic debates, and the viva. Um, in the case of a DBA, is they're looking for that for sure, but they're also looking for a persuasive argument that there's been a contribution to professional practice. Um, so, in some respects, the DBA is more challenging actually than the PhD.
That's really clear. Thank you. The next question is, will the research be in field or more of an open source desktop research?
Um, it depends on it can depend on the challenge. Most of them, most projects are grounded in the DBA student's own area of own professional area. Mostly that's with their employer. So there's some project based upon a challenge that's grounded in their employer. Some people, because they have visibility in a professional area, say, for example, in a professional a trade association or something like that, their project is at that level. But one of the things that the DBA student brings to the program is the project itself. That would be another difference also with the PhD. When the PhD student comes, they're expecting the university to help with finding an empirical setting. This is one of the things that the DBA student brings. They bring the empirical setting, the professional setting, the organizational challenge to the program.
And possibly slightly similar answer on this one. So the next question is, will we be paid during the tenure?
Paid during the program.
Yeah.
So this is in order to get on a DBA program, you have to have a full-time job. If you're paid in the full-time job, um, then yes, but you're fully employed. You've got an employer. They're paying your wage. Um, so uh, it all depends on your personal, kind of circumstances. I can advise that it's very difficult to do the empirical work for a DBA program, any DBA program, if you're out of work. I have, with all the experience I've worked with over 500 students over the years, so there isn't a scenario I've not encountered. And scenarios include people losing the job. And what we do, the way we manage it in that circumstance is to kind of pause the program for them, allow them to get back into employment and then restart it. Because it's next to impossible to collect the data if you've not got access to an organization. And that's any DBA program.
And that's probably just a question that stems from the difference between a PhD and a
Yeah.
DBA, where a
Yes, yeah.
PhD there might be funding. So that's
Yes,
obviously the difference between this.
okay, yeah.
There is no funding. It's you're in your own full-time
That
employment, and your project and your research is based on your actual job, your day-to-day job.
Yes, indeed, that's absolutely correct. Thank you for that for mentioning. That's absolutely correct. PhD students are often associated with a scholarship that somebody has made available. There are no scholarships for DBA students. I wish there were,
Mhm.
and it's because they're in full-time employment.
Yeah. Yeah, so that I'd say that's where that question is just stemming from. Then can you talk to us about the mathematics class or module we need to take? Is the maths done sort of by hand or by head, or is it using software?
It'll be using software. So the mathematics will appear during the training associated with quantitative research, if that's what the project involves. So that will be delivered online, like all the other training, and the tutors for that will organize them in the way it's not quantitative research is not my speciality. I tend to teach the qualitative research, but they will organize classes that give the appropriate, training that you need in order to be able to deliver the method.
So, do people need to kind of have a high level of maths to be able to do this, or they're quite supported
It,
within the program?
if people have been educated to the level of masters are experienced as they have the maths that they need. What quantitative researchers use is software. So there is some maths, but a lot of the training is on using various pieces of software and tools and statistical packages. So it's the teaching of how to use the tool that occurs in the classes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of reassuring for people as well. Is the DBA more practical or theoretical?
It's a mix of both. The idea is to put the theory to work. Theory is important. The literature reviews that everybody does will address theory in some way. But the challenge is putting it to work in a systematic way. So the DBA involves an integration of both these things. And this is what we cover through the training. This is, in the first semester, which I tend to lead. These are the sort of um, um, this sort of concept of doing research that's integrating theory and practice is the one that I teach on in semester one.
Yeah, great. And the next one is we have a good few more questions, so keep them coming. We just have another couple of minutes. So if anyone does have any other questions, make sure you're submitting them. We have a nice comment rather than a question, Paul. So just the outlining the case studies and the different approaches, impacts, and outcomes has been really useful.
Okay,
So
that's good.
thank you for that nice
Thank you.
comment. And then someone has said, given my background as a company and NGO founder and community leader, would my experience meet the program's senior management requirement?
Yes, so Armando, who you saw, the guy in Mozambique, he was an NGO. He led an NGO. That was its formal constitution in Mozambique. I mean, he reported into the Ministry of Agriculture, so it made him kind of like a department of the public service in that country. But he was an NGO. He led a particular organization that had been empowered, had been given responsibility to deliver that complex program that I spoke about. So, sorry, I've gone on a bit there. The answer is yes. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great. And I presume if people do have any question mark over their sort of eligibility and their level of management experience, can they drop yourself or Fiona an email?
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I am taking questions like this all the time. So please do that. Yeah, please do that. And if we
brilliant.
need a chat, we'll have a chat on Teams or something. Yeah, please
Great.
do.
And then another question, if I choose to do a DBA, can I still pursue my academic career, such as becoming a lecturer at a university?
Yes, you can. Interestingly enough, and I'm thinking of the thesis projects that I've supervised. I would say a good half of them, um, the researcher, the DBA researcher, um, acquired an academic position to some degree. Now that varied between people wanting to be a guest lecturer at their local university. So the fellow in Mozambique, for example, he was a guest lecturer at a couple of the universities in that country. I also supervised somebody who was a professor in a Tokyo business school, and somebody else who um, after their work got a full-time position in Australia. So yes, again, quick answer is yes, you can do that. What we do on the program that not all programs offered, and one of the modules, the professional development modules, in the second year is on teaching. So we actually do a module on teaching in higher education.
Well, that'd be really helpful for
Yeah.
pursuing a career
Yes. Yeah.
as a lecturer.
Yeah.
Then just two more. Is this a full-time study for 4 years?
Yep. We we categorize it as in university speak part-time. What that means is you're not here, you're not in this building all the time. So the PhD students is classified as full-time because their offices are just along the corridor from me at the moment. That's what we mean by full-time. It's almost like that for the PhD students, their job every day is the PhD. The idea of the DBA, because the setting is the organization itself, when you go to work, you are in the you are in the research field, as it were. The promise of the DBA at graduation, the promise of the DBA at graduation, is that scholarship becomes part of how you manage. We have this phrase that we call the scholar practitioner, so which is the scholar, they're having all these scholarly capabilities on the one hand, but also being an expert practitioner. Students come in to the program as expert practitioners. They graduate as scholar practitioners. So it's in one sense, it's full time because you're full time in work. But the study bit of it, as universities, we characterize as part time. So it's not 8-9 hours a day. The sort of work, if I was to give an estimate of the workload of the program per week, it would be 10 hours per week. What we aim to have in the DBA, particularly as we've designed it here, is a steady level of 10 hours a week through the calendar. Rather than, so this will be in contrast to some people's experience of the MBA, for example, where it can be, depending which program you're on, it can be incredibly intense, 30, 40 hours a week doing an MBA. A DBA is different. A DBA is a steady burn of 10 hours a week. So that's what we mean by part-time.
Yeah, and as you've already said, you've really designed it um with these senior managers in mind
Yes,
and
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah,
workload. So
yeah,
I think that's
yeah. I
really
was that
important
senior
feedback.
manager, Michelle, that didn't finish on time. I was that person, so yes, I have.
First-hand
Yeah,
experience.
yes, yes.
The next question, Deirdre, you might also come in on this one, but it's just a question around the fees. And do you have any advice or suggestions on funding the fee in terms of things like an educational loan? Or I know you've possibly experienced, Paul, that some people do get their organization to fund them. Any
Yes.
thoughts and advice on that? And maybe talking about the fee structure there
Mm-hmm.
might be
Yes, yeah,
helpful as well.
sure. Okay, so the fees on in our program is going to be spread evenly across the 4 years, so that would be €11,000 each year. A lot of other programs front load it into the first 2 years, but ours will be even through that year. That are typically made. That 11,000 is paid in 3 tranches, although you can arrange other payment schedules with the office. So that's the fees itself. In regard to scholarships themselves, there are no open scholarships for DBA degrees like they are with PhD degrees. What I am aware of is that individual DBA researchers will negotiate with their organizations maybe some contribution to the fees. I tend to be not I'm not party to these sort of discussions because they're private matters, but I do sometimes help the DBA researcher with arguments as to why it benefits an organization. I mean, fundamentally, the argument is they get a piece of high quality research done on their organization by one of their own. So at the end of it, it's not like a consultant comes in, does a piece of, or an academic comes in, does a piece of research, says, there's the report and leaves. The person who's done the research is in the organization with those same research skills, being able to use them on an ongoing basis. So DBA researchers use arguments like this to get some funding. In addition to that, in some countries, and it seems to vary from country to country, governments make available loans. They have to be repaid, but they make available loans or partial loans in support of the fees. Again, because I'm not familiar with all all the systems in the different countries. I can't advise particularly, but it's worth trying to search in the education ministry of your country whether that's available. In other countries, for example, Ireland, you can get tax reduction, yeah, on your income tax against your your fees. So there are a number of ways in which students uh, manage the fee
Yeah.
situation.
Deirdre, is there any just other comments on international students in them trying to fund their study?
No, I guess the DBA students would be different to our traditional students, if I can call them that, in that they are required to arrive here to be physically here in Maynooth, of course, and then the vast majority would have to apply for an entry visa, and part of that process is that they pay their full tuition fees at that time, which is normally early summer. But outside kind of the visa requirements, students obviously have to pay their full tuition fees before the program starts in September. So that's what we would normally expect, but our fees office are always open for one-on-one discussions or consultations if they wanted to do it by installment or if they had a, particular issue. And of course, as Paul was saying, the various maybe opportunities or sources of funding, never an issue for us. We're delighted if students can secure that or get a loan or get a company to part pay or whatever. So these students are slightly different to the normal or traditional international students. But our fees office, they're always open for help and support for students. But as it's spread over the 4 years evenly, I think I don't think it's so difficult for students. We're not looking for the total upfront in first year. So
Yeah.
it should be fine for most
Yeah,
of them.
that fee structure is helpful. I know my
Yeah.
last employer used to fund people's education and study, but then make you sign a new contract
Mm.
that you were obliged to, after you'd finished your study, to stay with them for a certain
Yes,
number
that's
of years. So
Yeah.
again,
that's common. Yeah, yeah.
that can kind of go in as part of your negotiations as well.
Mhm.
Mhm.
There's another question in to say, is there a chance to finish earlier than 4 years, for example, in 3 years?
No, not really. To be honest, and this is a consequence of the structure. It comes with we've got that highly structured design in order to finish in 4 years. But I've got to tell you, finishing in 4 years is quick. In 12 years and 500 plus students, 4 years is the fastest I've known anybody doing it. It is challenging. It is. There's no doubt about it. It can't be done, quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like it is certainly not a longer or a larger master's dissertation. The standard to which you're held is higher, and that just takes a bit of time. Yeah.
But you're supported with your supervisor
Yeah,
through all of
throughout
that
the
as
all
well.
4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we're just getting a couple of other questions on fees. So one of them just, is there any payment plan for the fees? So that's probably
Yeah,
something for fees and grants, is it?
yeah. So typically it's the 11,000 per year is the plan is every, I can't remember which months, maybe November, January, April, but it's 3 times during the year. But if your particular circumstances are such that you want something different, then the fees office are completely happy to have that conversation with you and
Great.
develop a plan works for you and allows you to keep studying.
And Deirdre, you may or may not know the answer to this one. If not, we can follow up separately. But as a non-onshore student in Ireland, is there payment plans available?
Again, yes, our fees office, they're always open to help and support students. So, um, yes, I mean, as you get, as you during the application process, if that is an issue, just reach out to myself or Paul or whatever, and we'll, put you in touch with the fees office, and the student can discuss it, confidentially with the fees office. But yeah, there's always the opportunity there to have a bespoke, unique payment plan, if you like. Yeah. Mhm.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. That seems to be all we have in for questions. So if anybody else has anything to ask, throw it up in the chat quickly. Otherwise, Paul, you might just remind people of your and Fiona's contact details.
Okay, yeah, let me just, I can go back to the start, I think. So if I just share my screen again for a moment, if I may.
Sorry, now I'm putting you on the spot. We can email them around afterwards as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say on that second page there's my email address if that's helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, what we will do is send around the recording to everyone. As Paul mentioned, this session is being recorded, and Paul's contact details are in there, and we'll include them in the email as well. So if anybody has any questions that they didn't get to.
Okay.
But any email that comes into dba@mu.ie goes to myself and Paul. So if they just even email dba@mu.ie, we'll get it.
dba@mu.ie. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
that's
Easy
it.
to remember. Thank you, Fiona.
Yeah, no problem.
So thank you so much to everyone who joined us. That was a really informative session. You are getting lots of nice comments, Paul, to say that was very helpful. So
Okay, I'm glad.
great that we've answered questions for people. So thank you all for attending, and hopefully we will see you in September.
Okay, hopefully so.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank